Welcome back to I Am Refocused Radio, man. We are here again, and once again, man, we have a true honor. This guy is busy. It took a long time getting him on this show because his calendar is that full. Today, we're talking with someone who's been in the trenches for the justice system for over 3 decades. The one and only Saul Bienenfeld. He is going to share with I Am Refocused Radio all of his personal experience being in this amazing field. I mean, we have a powerhouse today. His early days as an ADA in New York Special Notorious Bureau into his work as a criminal defense attorney protecting people's rights and reputation. Saul knows what he's doing. We're not just talking about street smart. We're not just talking about book smart. We're talking about no nonsense, straight talk strategy. And this guy is going to unpack it all for us. So first and foremost, Saul, I want to say thank you for taking time talking to us today, man. How you doing?
It's such a pleasure to be on your show, Shemai. I just really appreciate it. I've been a listener. I've heard your radio podcast, and I'm just so happy to be a guest here. So thank you again for this opportunity. It's amazing.
Yes, sir. Man, let's get right to it, man. As a professional in this field, I can only imagine the weight that you have to carry with your clients. What sparked the interest to get into this career?
It's such an interesting question because, I've always been drawn to the fight for fairness. Early on in my career, I saw how the system can work for and against people depending on who's standing beside them. So I wanted to be that person who stands between an individual and the full force of the state, of the government, someone who knows the rules of the game and can play them with integrity. Early on, I represented clients that everyone else had written off, accused and shamed and completely alone. And I fought hard to prove the truth. That experience showed me that the law isn't just about punishment, it's about redemption and justice. And that's when I knew that this was definitely my path.
When you think about and reflect on the decades of practicing law in New York, what's changed in the most different or interesting ways when it comes to justice being served, and what hasn't changed at all?
So two of the biggest changes in New York, at least, is the discovery rules and the Bail Reform Act. So the discovery rules is very interesting because it used to be that, eventually the government has to give you everything that they have that's against your client, whether it's writings, whether it's videos, whether it's, bad acts that they might know about or bad acts of other witnesses. They have to give it to you eventually. And what would happen consistently is that 2 hours before the trial is when you would get all this material. So now you have 500 pages you have to go through. You have 2 hours before a trial starts. It's really unfair. So the discovery rules changed that within 30 days of the arrest, the prosecutor has to start giving you over the main discovery against your client. So I'm getting body cam footage. I'm getting, statements. I'm getting rap sheets from witnesses. I'm getting a lot of stuff now much earlier on. And it's so much easier for me, not just because I have it early on, but because I can make a decision whether we're going to go to trial, whether we're going to take a plea. I could form a proper defense rather than seeing it hours before a trial. That was really unfair. So that was a great ruling that the legislature came up with, in favor of defendants, and really made it a lot more fairer, for a trial. And the other thing that changed a lot was the Bail Reform Act. It used to be if you had money, you didn't have to stay in jail after you got arrested. That was the bottom line. There are people in jail who unfortunately don't have money for bail, and they're innocent. And they're staying in jail even though they're innocent because the bail was set at, let's say, $500. And they couldn't come up with $500, as low as that. So the Bail Reform Act basically says, listen, we're going to go to a cashless system. Unless it's a very severe charge, it's going to be cashless. You have to report to probation. You might have to wear an ankle bracelet. You would have to maybe post your house, like mortgage your house to the government. If you run away, the government would take your house away from you. But you don't have to put up money. And that really helped the system with the Bail Reform Act. You're going to see a lot of articles that, the judge let him out and he committed another crime. It happens, but the majority of the people you're not seeing. You're seeing the majority of people who are accused of a crime, not convicted of a crime. They're still accused of the crime. Remember, they're presumed innocent, are now out. And it makes it so much easier to defend because now I don't have to go to Rikers Island or to other prisons to visit my clients, which takes a whole day for a 2-hour meeting. They could come to my office, and it just makes it a lot easier.
Once again, listen, I'm Refocused Radio and watching us online, talking to our guest today, Saul Bienenfeld. When you think about the system and from your experience, looking through the lens of the courtroom, what are some of the biggest misconceptions that you believe the public gets wrong about criminal defense attorneys?
Wow. The biggest misconception is that, we're defending bad people. Well, I'm not defending anyone who's bad. I'm defending someone who's accused of a crime. The person is not bad because he's accused of a crime. He's presumed innocent. And most of my clients are good people who may or may not have made a mistake in their life. I'm looking to the future. I'm looking to help these people out of a situation where sometimes they're innocent and sometimes they did not do what they were accused of. And it's a horrible thing to paint them with the same brush that you would paint someone who's convicted. My job is to defend the Constitution, not just to defend an individual, but to defend the Constitution, to make sure that the police, that the government are on the same page and following the rules that are supposed to be followed. One is that when that's done, then I know I did a successful job. But the people have a perception that I'm the bad guy because I'm defending somebody who's accused of a crime. I'm not the bad guy. That's my job.
When you think about how public plays their part in America, we know a lot about that, where sometimes cases can be tried in the public opinion before it even starts in the courtroom. So how do you navigate, or have you navigated with your clients in cases that are emotionally charged?
Well, one of the things we might consider doing if the client is of means, so to speak, is that we would hire a PR firm and we would put positive press out there and try to reshape the narrative that the government is showing, because it's all about storytelling. It's all about what the papers are going to write about the client. The papers could have a negative spin on it, or they could have a positive spin on it. And I try to make that spin as positive as possible, whereas the prosecutors are making it as a negative as possible. They're not just trying cases on the facts. They're actually creating and weaving a story for the public to hear. And they're weaving a story for the jury to hear. And they're weaving a story for the judge to hear. And they're putting a very negative spin on that story. I've had cases where the government has discussed things about the client that have nothing to do with the accusations, just to make him look bad. And sometimes they're not even true. Most of the time, they're not true. The government is guessing at this stuff. All right. And it's very hard to prove a negative. Client is accused of reaching out to another girl, which he never reached out to. But, there's a text message. But the text message was an instant text message. And I don't have the opportunity sometimes to explain it the proper way because I need my client to remain silent. But the government has an opportunity to paint it with a very broad brush as a negative inference against my client. And it seems unfair most of the time, and it is unfair. So with the right client and the right amount of money, I could actually hire a public relations firm to paint it a positive way, or I could do it myself if they don't have enough money for a PR firm. And that's what's important. The public perception of a client before a trial is very important, and I need to get that done right away.
I'm sure you have dealt with many first-time defendants. When you balance the emotions that can probably come with someone who's new to this first-time experience, how do you help them keep their composure when facing the unknown?
I always say that this job is part criminal defense attorney and part social worker. Luckily, my wife is a social worker, so I understand the whole aspect of social work from her. But the truth is, with a first-time defendant, it's a very scary life that they have. They don't know what's going to happen. Everyone asks me what's going to happen as if I could tell the future. I'm a prophet. I'm not a prophet. I'm a criminal defense attorney, and I will tell you the possibilities of what will happen, and I'll even give you percentages of what might happen. But I can't tell you for sure what's going to happen. I have a client that was accused of a serious crime. He started researching prisons. I'm like, why are you researching prisons? You're just accused of a crime. You haven't been convicted. Like you're like 150 steps ahead of this process. You don't need to be there. But I understand the fear that they're having. And I understand, the tension in their home. And I understand the tension between the spouses. And I understand the tension between the children and the community. When the community shuns somebody because they've been accused of a crime, it's a horrible thing. The community decides, okay, well, you're accused of a crime. You haven't been convicted of it, but we're never going to talk to you. And you never could be able to come into the synagogue or the church again. And you are now shunned from the community. It's a very lonely existence. And I need to navigate that along with my client and his family to say, this too will pass. You will get through this, and hopefully we'll get through this successfully together. But it's an uphill battle sometimes, and it's a very scary thing for a first-time accused person.
Once again, listen, I'll Refocused Radio and watching this online, talking to our guest today, Saul Bienenfeld. Speaking of reform, that is something that a lot of people are passionate of talking about when it comes to justice. What's one reform that you believe could make a biggest impact on fairness in terms of how we give justice?
Well, I think we have to do away or change what's called the Sex Offender Registry Act, SORA. That act was written for a very good reason, but it's not effective. That's the bottom line. What the act basically says is if you're accused and convicted of a sex crime, you need to register with the police, sometimes every 6 months, sometimes once a year, and your face goes on the internet and people know about you and they could look you up. And then you're restricted as to where you could live. You can't live near a school. And that works for some very serious criminals. But it does not work for the 18-year-old who had a 15-year-old girlfriend and they had what they thought was consensual sex, which turns out to be a crime, which it is a crime in this state and others. And the rest of his life, he's shunned and he's on this registry. And when he eventually marries somebody and has children, he can't drop his kids off at school because of something he did when he was 18 years old. And now, today, 10 years later, when he's 28 years old, he's a model citizen. But yet, he can't go to school to pick up his daughter. That needs to be changed. Those laws need serious reformation. It should be done on an individual basis. Everyone should be different. There should not just be 3 categories on the registry. There's a category 1, 2, and 3. 3 is the most severe. 1 is the least severe. Everyone should have their own individualized justice, because what it ends up being is a life sentence. A life sentence. For the rest of your life, you might be on that registry, and you might be a perfect individual, and it's very hard to get off the registry, and it's very hard, not impossible, to lower the ranking from 3 to 2 to 1. I've been successful with a couple of them, but it's not an easy task to do. It's well worth it after a couple of years in the registry to show a judge, I'm not the same person I was when you sentenced me. I'd like my registration to be lowered, but not every judge is interested in doing it. And it's a very hard process to do it. But it needs to be done, and it needs to be re-examined, and it needs to be reformed. I think it's a huge problem in our system.
Being rooted in NYC's diverse culture, you've been able to read people, if you will, for a long time. How do you see the community and culture playing a role in the pursuit of justice?
You know, in New York City, it's not. It used to be. You know, if you're white, you get out of jail, and if you're black, you go to jail. And it's not that way anymore. Everyone is treated equally. I believe that the police department, there's very little racism going on. It used to be a tremendous amount. Very little I see these days. I see a lot of fairness among the NYPD. I see a lot of fairness in the U.S. Attorney's Office. It used to be in the U.S. Attorney's Office, if you were Italian, you had to be part of the mafia. Now that doesn't exist anymore. There's much more diversity and fairness among the people working in the NYPD, among the people working in the DA's office, among the people working in the U.S. Attorney's Office, and I don't see any racism, and I don't see any cultural bias. I have clients that are being accused of crimes, and that, I'm being accused of this crime because I'm black. I'm being accused of this crime because I'm Jewish. I hear it from my clients, but I don't see any evidence based on that. I understand their frustration. I understand how they're feeling that way. I understand, that they're looking for an excuse why they're being accused of a certain crime, but I don't see any evidence to back those allegations up for the most part, which is a great thing. I'm very happy that, we've come this far in 2025 that I could say that and say it with confidence.
Once again, listen to I Am Refocused Radio and watching us online. Make sure you go to unrefocusedradio.com. Check out all the amazing interviews like this one. We're talking to our guest today, Saul Bienenfeld. When you think about your legacy and you think about all the time that you poured into your career, what keeps you still motivated after all these years?
It's the kindness that I have to my clients. When I tell people, what should you look for in a criminal defense attorney? I said, well, you have to look for somebody with experience. You have to look for somebody with knowledge, because, as I say, experience plus knowledge equals success. But you have to look for somebody who you would invite over to your house for dinner, who could be able to sit with your mother, your father, your kids, your wife, and you should be comfortable with that person. And you have to hire somebody that you could tell the absolute truth to, no matter how embarrassing it might be, no matter how upsetting it might be, somebody you could be totally honest with. When you could find that person, that's the person to hire as your criminal defense attorney, because that's the person you're going to get along with, and that's the person who's going to help you most. So when I tell that to clients, I have to live it myself. I have to really appreciate that my clients are going through a very difficult time. I have to be very sensitive to that. I try to return text messages within 3 minutes of seeing them most of the time, because I know the person on the other end is very anxious. I asked my lawyer a question. I need an answer. I know lawyers that don't get back to clients for 3-4 days. I'm getting back to clients within 10 minutes if I can. If I can't, then as soon as possible. But people need to know that the lawyer on the other side is a person who's going to answer their questions and a person available to them. And I have to understand that my clients are extremely anxious about what the future is going to bring for them. Extremely anxious. And the question that they might ask me is, I need to write an email. I need to write a letter. Is this okay? And it might be a very silly thing, to look at, but I want to answer them immediately, because I know how difficult it is and how much the hard time they're going through. So I need to help them as soon as possible.
My last question for you is someone who's watching in New York area where you are, and they feel like, wow, I need to call Saul right now, or I need to text him. I need to go find this guy. Kind of walk us through, as we're wrapping this up, what can they expect as far as the process from the email, the call, from meeting in the office to getting it going?
Sure. So it usually starts with a phone call. I'll be happy to speak to you. There's no charge to speak to you on the phone to hear what the problem is. And then we'll set up a meeting. I like to meet in person. I do have clients that I've only seen on Zoom. Zoom is a great thing, but I prefer meeting in person. And that meeting expected to take about 2 hours. And during that meeting, we'll go through every possibility. I want to understand what you're being accused of or what you're being investigated for. I want to know as much as your background as possible, including where you went to high school, where you went to college. What did you study? What's your favorite dish to eat? I need to know everything about you in those 2 hours. It's almost like going on a first date. And then we need to come up with a strategy. And you will hear a strategy in that first meeting. What is the strategy to defend this person? All right. And then we start to gather evidence. After that meeting, we're going to start to gather evidence. We might have to hire a private investigator. And then it comes to discussions with the prosecutor. If you've been accused of a crime and we have to go to court, there are court appearances, and I get more discovery. And there might be motions. There might be motions to suppress evidence. There might be motions to offer evidence. And eventually, this all leads to possible hearings and a trial. And if we get there, you will be very prepared for what comes next, because all my clients are extremely prepared and knowledgeable about the process. I don't leave anyone in the dark. When I get discovery from the U.S. Attorney's Office, when I get discovery from the DA's office, I read it over. I immediately share it with the client. They need to know what discovery I have, and then we will talk about it. And we will set up time to speak about it, and we'll go over every single thing I have, whether it's a video from a body cam footage, whether it's a document, whether it's a bank statement, whatever type of case it is. We will review it. You'll explain it to me. I'll explain to you what the other side, the prosecutor, is thinking when they see this, because I've been a prosecutor, so I have that experience. And I could see an email, I could see a text message, and I say, to you and me, to my client, to you and me, this looks like an innocent text message, but let me tell you what the prosecutor is thinking. And we have to defend against what they're thinking, because I know when they saw this text message, they didn't think it was so innocent. Here's how they're going to build their case. So let's come up with a defense. And we will have a tremendous amount of preparation time, and hopefully we'll enjoy each other's company, because I don't want to be a tyrant. I want to be your friend and your defense attorney.
And real quick, for those who are like, man, Shimon, make sure you ask this one. If they want to find you, what's the best way to get a hold of you in the website?
The website is www.bienenfeldlaw.com. So that's BIENENFELDLAW.com. And you could definitely have my contact information there. I'm on Instagram at Bienenfeld Law. I'm also on YouTube, Bienenfeld Law. You could find me on YouTube. You can find my videos there as well. And, call my office. It's 212-363-7701. I'll be happy to speak to you. If I'm not around, I'll take a message and I will definitely get back to you. So anyone who's going through an investigation, if you've been arrested, if you're not happy with the attorney you have, you feel you're not getting the right answers, call me. We'll discuss it. We'll see if we can work together.
You've been watching I Am Refocused Radio and listening to us on radio and podcast. I want to say to our guest today, Saul Bienenfeld, thank you for your time today, man.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure. It's good seeing you.